We're back with another episode of the One Pour Problems podcast, and today we're on the road, hosted by the Rebellion Group. And today I have my friend Chris DiPentima, President and CEO of CBIA, joining me for the episode. Super excited to have you on the show.
Great to be on with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, today we're going to talk about, your background, but your role now, which is very different from what I would consider like a traditional leadership role where you are leading a team for a mission and like that's exactly what you're focused on. But in reality, with CBIA, you're leading a team, but then you're also leading like an entire, business industry. And so, it's a kind of a dual threat leadelership that we're going to be talking about today. But before we dive into all of that, we have to talk about the drinks that we have on the show. So, why is the espresso martini something that's significant to you?
Yeah, thanks for making me the espresso martini. So I have a group out there that I'm very close to of business leaders from Connecticut. It continues to grow and grow, which is great. And we call ourselves espresso crushers because we all have an affinity to espresso martinis. Mm-hmm. It's something that kind of wakes you up when you're doing a 10:30 a.m. podcast or like any time during the day. As you found out when we're making it today, you have just different styles and types, even though it's the exact same drink. And we had the Litchfield Distillery to highlight and feature a local Connecticut incredible place. People often forget about the great things we have in our state, and Litchfield's one of those great places. They not only make bourbons, but a lot of folks don't know that they make espresso martinis and other things as well. So it was nice to be able to showcase Connecticut and also something that's near to dear in my heart, and that's the deep relationships that people have across our state, especially this group of business leaders that I'm fortunate enough to be very friendly with.
Yeah, no, I love it, and super excited to be able to have this today. Cheers.
Cool.
Yep, and so I've been told a few times now, when you're making the espresso martinis, you really gotta shake with your heart, because if there's no foam, you didn't do it right. So hopefully I was able to live up to the standard and make the espresso crushers proud.
There you go. Yeah, you made them proud. Yeah, there was more foam in here before too. We've been talking for a while. That's off camera, but this is a good drink.
Excellent. So jumping into the episode, right? So we're talking about engaging a diverse business culture, and also embracing failure today. So start off by just kind of telling people a little bit about you, your background, and then dive into like what you do today at CBIA and what the mission of CBIA is.
Yeah, my it's kind of different. I think when people find out, where I came from and how I got to the CBI role, they're a little confused maybe. Maybe I am too, I don't know. But it's a bit of a meandering. There's some people, I talk to my 3 daughters about this all the time. Some people are just, A to B and they get there in that straight line. Mm-hmm. And my professional career has been a bit more of a curvy pathway. Born and raised in Connecticut. I lived here all my life except for the 4 years I went away to college in Boston at Boston College. Quinnipiac Law School brought me back here. I graduated college as an English major, didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I think my dad told me I could be a taxi driver or a bartender or I better go to law school. And I chose the last one. And Quinnipiac would just move their law school to Hamden at the time from the University of Bridgeport. And went to law school there and found that I did have a passion for law, specifically trial law, litigation, and practiced law in Connecticut for 8 years. I met my wife at Quinnipiac as well. So, we have a connection in Connecticut. She's a Connecticut resident too. Came back from going to school in Florida to go to law school at Quinnipiac, so similar path. Mm-hmm. Thought I'd be a lawyer forever. Thought one day maybe I'd be a judge. Just thought this was the path for me. I really, really loved it. Mm-hmm. And then my dad had started a manufacturing company in 1989, which was one of the reasons I went to law school, was not to get involved in the manufacturing business. Uh-huh. And my dad's kind of one of the, I call him one of the last of the true entrepreneurs. He just bought and sold companies that were in distress, financial distress, leveraged them with the relationships he had with his banks, and then flipped them. But this manufacturing company became a bit of a legacy company for him, and eventually I gave in 2002 and joined that company where my older brother was working as well, and took over from my dad in 2006 as president and CEO. Thought I'd be in manufacturing the rest of my life too. I really loved manufacturing. and sold the company in 2016, but stayed on with the business that I sold to, which was a Fortune 500 company. So I went from a privately held, family-owned company overnight to a publicly traded company with locations around the world, which is just great. Did a lot of traveling for the 5 years I was with them. Eventually got promoted to run multiple locations, including the Connecticut location, but a couple in France, one in Washington State, and one in Southern California. And like I said, thought I'd do that forever. During that time, I was on the CBIA board. I was asked to join the CBIA board in 2012 by then CEO John Rathgaber, who was 2 CEOs before me. And I got elevated to an officer's role by my predecessor, Joe Brennan. So became chair in 2018 of CBIA. Loved the organization, loved what they stood for. My predecessor announced he was retiring. He convinced me to apply for the job. I still love manufacturing, and I was like, I probably won't get this job anyways. I'm not qualified, but they were looking for an operations people. They were looking for policy people. They ran a great process that really made me think about what difference I would make to the organization and to the state. And I was fortunate to get offered the job. Of course, I got offered it in February of 2020.
Yep, perfect timing.
Yeah, a month later, the world came crashing down. Was supposed to start in June timeframe, but we ended up pushing it off to an August start because I needed to stay with my organization and kind of help get them through the pandemic. And he knew CBIA in the state of Connecticut, and Joe Brennan did a fantastic job leading Connecticut through the pandemic as well. So, like I said, it's a long, twisted story about how I got there. But now here I am with the CBIA, great organization, great membership, great board of directors.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've talked to a few different, leaders that have come from family-led manufacturing organizations, like, Joe Mayer from Bede, Colby Combs from Westminster Tool, and like just the legacy side. So I'm more interested in, maybe some of the viewers are interested to hear, what led to the decision of saying like, hey, this is a family-run manufacturing business, why is now the time, to be able to move on, right? Because you hear a lot of them that are continuing the legacy and passing it down, all of that. But your story is different. So just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, it is a little different because my older brother was in the business as well. My dad, like I said, was kind of the last of the true serial entrepreneurs, and he had bought this company in California. He had bought a bunch of companies in the mid-90s, late 90s, early 2000s.
Very cool.
And as a classic entrepreneur, kind of just bolted them onto this core manufacturing. And they didn't necessarily have a lot of commonality. They were all manufacturing companies, but some were commercial, some were aerospace, some were defense. And they bought this company in California in 2001, which was the first kind of intellectual property, had its own IP that he bought. So it was different, but again, it was manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so it needed just a different leadership. And so he had asked me to join that. I mean, I loved being a lawyer. It was a tough decision for me. In fact, to the point where I ended up working both jobs for about 8 months. I worked in the manufacturing company for a couple days a week, and then I'd go to the law firm a couple days a week as well, because I just wasn't too sure if I wanted to make the change.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when someone offers you an opportunity to lead a company, even though it was a smaller piece of it from California, it's like giving you a blank piece of paper and being able to kind of craft your own story and your own roadmap. And it's tough to say no to that, especially having been, an associate and a junior partner at a law firm. You don't really get that opportunity to be your own boss and your own leader. Even when you're a partner, you're sharing that leadership with multiple people.
Sure.
And so this was an opportunity to be my own leader, and eventually, it worked well enough where I grew in the bigger organization as well, took over HR and finance, and eventually took over operations. And then, as I said, succeeded my dad in 2006, so about 4 years after coming on board as president and CEO. But it's tough, as Kobe and Joe probably told you. It's great to be your own leader, but you're also not just navigating the business side of it; you're navigating the family side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot at stake. You want to make sure you're successful for your family, your immediate family, for the employees who are like family. And there's this legacy pressure as well, right? You're that next generation, and you want to make it grow and be better, not shrink and be worse than the generation before.
Yep.
So it's there's a lot of challenges that come with it, but I think it really makes for better leadership when you've got those multifaceted challenges that you've got to navigate through.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about CBIA and specifically about, what's the mission behind CBIA, and then, from there, how do you drive buy-in from, the internal organization, your team, and then also, buy-in from all the stakeholders from outside, right? All the businesses that are part of the membership.
Yeah, there's a diverse group of stakeholders, as you said. There's the internal, the external, the public side, the public government, the private sector. I'll start with CBIA. I think a lot of people, CBIA, we don't have an identity crisis, but we have an identity challenge because we do so much at CBIA. CBIA, most people don't realize, is a 210-year-old organization, started in 1815 on the banks of the Connecticut River in Middlesex, Connecticut, when a bunch of manufacturers got together back then. The U.S. was 38, 39 years old. We were like this little country, it's a young little country, not nearly what we are today. And the manufacturers came together because at that time the U.S. was purchasing a lot from overseas. We hadn't established our industrial base. And interestingly enough, given where we are at today's time, the manufacturers were advocating for tariffs so that the U.S. government, the Connecticut government, would buy more locally to grow and develop the industrial base, which was basically non-existent. We had an industrial base from the war, but then that went away, and okay, now what do we do in the U.S.? Are we farmers? Are we industrialists? Are we both?
Yeah. Wow.
And so they established this organization, the Society for Connecticut Manufacturers, and which is the roots of what CBI eventually become, and has advocated for a more competitive business climate in Connecticut since 1815. So that's the core of CBIA, and I think a lot of folks do know CBIA as that advocacy organization on behalf of the business community. Mm-hmm. But what some folks don't realize is, because we've been around for so long, and because we have such a large and wide membership, we're the oldest business association in the country, and we're one of the largest business associations in the country.
Amazing.
It's amazing to think that CBIA roots started 100 years before the U.S. Chamber started in 1915. But over that time, the organization became aware of, we've got this diverse group of businesses, many of them small and mid-sized. We're advocating for a more competitive environment. Maybe there's something we could help to bring them together to help lower their costs as well. Mm-hmm. And so we developed a lot of products and services, really started in the 1970s for small and mid-sized businesses. And some products have started and have since gone by the wayside at that time. Mm-hmm. But today we offer things like employee benefits, medical, dental, life insurance. We offer energy purchasing as a standalone, or we aggregate small businesses together to look like a big company to help get better energy purchasing. Memberships have access to HR attorney too for compliance questions, mm-hmm. and employee challenges or employee opportunities. We offer member resources, which is like a B2B. So members that have products and services offering it to the rest of the membership at a discount. Yep. Events and programs. I know you've been to many of them where they're kind of best practice sharing, whether it's things that are going on with the Connecticut economy or workforce or leadership series as mm-hmm. well. And so that's kind of that second leg of the stool, as I call it. And then the third leg is something, as you know, we started about 2 years ago this summer, the CBIA Foundation, which I'm wearing proudly the pullover. We just had the second annual golf tournament that you were at a couple of weeks ago at a little bit of a hot day in Treadle Meadow. Yeah, a little hot that day. But the foundation is focused on researching what are some of the competitive challenges that Connecticut has and what are some of the best practices out there in other states or across the world. And those could be around budgeting, housing, immigration, energy. So we've done a lot of research on, where are some of our weakest issues, and then what are some solutions? And that's mm-hmm. what we try to bring everything is, hey, here, identify an issue or highlight something that's going well, Litchfield Distillery. But for an issue, what are some solutions? What are some, and it's not the end all be all, but it's to get that conversation going. Mm-hmm. As you know, that's really important that you come to the table willing to offer solutions and then be able to stay at that table as the group works through different iterations of solutions, and hopefully you all come to a good conclusion.
Yeah, and that's my favorite part of, being a member of CBIA is that, a lot of people will stand, on their side of the fence and bitch about all the things that are going on in Connecticut and all their problems, but nobody wants to actually do something about it, right? They expect you and, our policymakers, like to be able to come up with all these things that, we on the private side have a ton of insight, right? We're living it day to day. We know some of the problems that we're running into and see it. And, I feel like it's our duty to go and have those conversations and be willing to speak on those things. And I know that I've certainly taken advantage of that. And, I remember speaking, a month or two ago on the workforce, event that you guys had. And we talked a little bit about like where AI comes in and how that's helping workforce or hindering. And, there's a lot of misconception, but I love that as a member, I get pulled into some of those things to be able to voice my opinion and things that we see, and also offer solutions, to the things that might be able to work. And so
be part of the solution. Yeah.
I love that collaboration side. And that is definitely my favorite part of CBIA. And it's helped us navigate a bunch of things. And hopefully some of the things that I've brought up have been able to bring value to not only CBIA, but others, in the state.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I tell this story not too often to people, but one of the reasons I chose to apply for the CBIA role was I had become one of those people who was sitting on the sideline and complaining about the state. After I sold the company in 2016, as I said, I was still running Connecticut, but I started to run operations outside of the state. So I was spending a lot of time outside of the state, like 3 weeks every month outside of the state.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe this is my chance. I'm finally out of Connecticut. I'm moving out of there. And then I sit from the sidelines from afar and watch what would happen during the session or whatever, and less engaged, still a member of CBIA, but less engaged. And I was like, I can't believe what the state's doing. This is, and just complaining about it. And then as I started to go through the interviewing process, I was like, this is my chance to actually get back engaged like I was, beforehand, and work with people to do something about it. So I could sit here and complain on the sideline and maybe try to get my family to move out of Connecticut, which probably would never happen. Or I could get fully engaged, like 100% engaged, spend all my time in Connecticut, all my time with the business community, all my time with people in this state who really are passionate about it and love it, and figure out a way to come up with some solutions to our challenges, because there is no solution too big when you're collaborating together. And so that was... I remember I was in Washington State staying in a hotel room like I always did, and I was literally getting ready one morning to go into the manufacturing shop in Washington, and standing in the mirror, and that process went through my head. Why am I not all in on this interview process? This is the chance to do it, and that's when I really was like, I really want this now. I was kind of reluctantly applying, but now I'm like, I really want this position, and was actually going to be disappointed if I didn't get selected. But that's it. You're right. It's that engagement level. And Connecticut's a small enough state where you can be engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that's a good pivot to talking about a lot of the businesses that are focused on their day-to-day operations. How do you convince them to get more engaged and have them really dive into having some of the conversations that are, the larger economic issues that, we're talking about here? How do you activate them?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we often use this phrase, I think lately, you got to meet people where they are. We certainly have to do that because there's different levels of engagement. You don't have to be all in issuing testimony or at the Capitol lobbying, or you don't have to be all in sitting on a panel sharing best practices or identifying best practices. There's definitely varying levels of engagement. And it's challenging for Connecticut's businesses because the majority of them, when you look at the side, we're the land of small businesses in Connecticut. I was reading a stat the other day where we have 150,000 registered companies with employees in Connecticut, and something like 100,000 of them are 5 employees and less. Wow. I mean, we are, and 99% of our companies are, determined small businesses. Yeah. And our membership, 93% of our membership is 100 employees or less, which kind of represents the demographics of Connecticut. Mm-hmm. If you're a 5-employee company, you're trying to keep your customers happy, the lights on, you pay your employees, figure out all the compliance issues with the state. Mm-hmm. It's challenging to then say, hey, I want to get engaged at a level. But there's varying levels of getting engaged. Like I said, with the membership, it's certainly saying, if you're telling us you have an issue, that's the level of engagement. You don't even have to necessarily come with a problem with it. Walk us through the issue, educate us at CBIA on the issue, because the businesses are the experts. Tell us specifically why you're having issues complying with this, or why would this law be bad for you, whether it's a tax or regulatory law, a labor law, whatever. And then get us inside your businesses so we understand and we can say, okay, now we can advocate more effectively as your advocates at the Capitol. And we could certainly work with people to come up with maybe a better solution than what's being proposed. So even that small size business, if they let us come through, if they let us do even a tour with a legislator, if they just meet their legislators and engage with them, develop those relationships, when the time comes, then they can maybe send them a text or give them a call and say, hey, I heard from CBIA, this is a real issue, and I'll tell you why it's an issue for me. Those personal relationships really move the needle in Connecticut. Legislators often tell us if they get a call from 3 constituents, that's a big issue for them. That's how little it takes to move the needle. So that smallest business, be our educator, and be the expert on what the issues are for you. And then as you work up and you have more people who can get more engaged, there's certainly things like testimonies or even bigger legislative tours, speaking on a panel, attending our events where we do often have a lot of policymakers there, so you can network and talk to policymakers. Sitting on one of our policy councils, we have 7 different policy councils that have different topics, and businesses come together. Because at CBIA, again, we're not really the experts of what affects businesses. I'm a business person, so I can kind of guess on how things will impact businesses. But we need the business community, the membership, to tell us what's good, what's bad, and how this will affect them. And then we can go do the advocacy because you've now made us an expert on a topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one thing to challenge some of those organizations that are, 5 people or below is, I think being open to say, hey, I need to leverage the services of CBIA and the things that you offer to help remove things off of my plate, right? So I can continue to grow my business and get to the point where then I can also get more involved by doing a panel or the testimonials, like all those things. Like, I think that's one of the biggest missteps by those smaller organizations is, they don't take the time because they don't think they have the time to learn about the services or engage for the services. Like if someone came to you and just said, hey, I am looking for, a permanent thing to go in place to be able to handle all these random HR things and hiring and firing because I don't have that, I'm pretty sure they could reach out, get that, and then be able to instantly, get those resources brought to them that might be able to enable them, to fix whatever issues they're dealing with, right? And so get involved there.
Leverage their products and services. That's why they came about in the 1970s, right?
Yeah.
To make businesses, advocate for more competitive businesses, but to make the business more competitive for a 5-person company at a very low entry fee for membership of hundreds of dollars, right? What you probably pay in the old days for a magazine subscription. Probably less than that. Than you pay for a magazine subscription. But to your point, all right, do you not offering medical insurance? Okay, don't just think of us as the medical insurance company. Then do you pay energy bills? I'm sure you do. Everyone pays an energy bill. Maybe we should have our energy group go out and get a free quote for you to see if you can lower your energy costs. And to your point, access to HR or attend an event for relatively low cost to learn about best practices around recruitment, retention, whatever it is. You're spot on. That's why there's something there for everyone. The key is don't pigeonhole the organization as just doing that. You got to look at all the tools in the toolbox, and that's important.
Yeah, and I'll also give kudos to you and the team of like one of the things that I think is like one of the best things that might even just be unintended. But you guys doing all these tours and learning about the businesses, your team is also then like acting as like their individual marketing arms, right? Because you're like, hey, Chris was on site at this local business and they did a tour, they met with these people who are the owners, and this is what they do and all that stuff. All of a sudden, that goes out to your following, that goes out to the members, and then all these people learn about those businesses, right? So like, even if you can't get involved, like to whatever degree, you think involvement is, like reaching out to be able to say, hey, we'd love to have you guys come down and take a look at what we're doing and learn about us. Like, you're never going to say no to that.
Right.
And they're going to get benefits out of it. So, I think there's a lot that can go into that can get people just to say, hey, there's value in the relationships. Like, for the 100 or it's like, I don't even know, it's a couple $100 or something to be a member.
Exactly.
But like, just for that, like, just the marketing alone of doing a tour, that alone should like be worth the membership. And then think about all the other benefits and all that kind of stuff. So I love what you guys are doing with that. And I think it's great in our state to be able to have like an advocate like that. So again, it's just more of I love what you guys are doing, and I want to continue to see more of it and encourage people to engage more.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're right about the visits. We're very intentional and strategic about that. We want to put the faces to what the Connecticut business community stands for. When I first joined CBIA, just so many legislators told me, Connecticut businesses are all about profit. It's all about greed. And I kept going, these 5-person businesses, that's all that. I'm like, have you run a business, Mr. and Mrs. Policymaker?
Yep.
And so one of our strategic pillars that we rolled out early on was what we call hearts and minds, but educating the minds and winning the hearts, not only of Connecticut policymakers, but of all of our residents, to really get rid of this bad perception about the business community that it's just brick and mortar or glass windows that you see when driving through the highway or an industrial park. And that these are employers and employees working together, the best workforce in the world, being very productive to overcome Connecticut's cost challenges, right? Mm-hmm. With these deep relationships with other businesses and residents, the biggest donors in the community, usually, go to a T-ball game or a Little League game, you see businesses in the back of every jersey, signs across the outfield, and same thing with drama and everything else.
Yes.
And so it was critical that we had put this face and had this voice of the business community, so that social media, those visits, is very intentional and very important to remind our lawmakers, hey, we visited 4 people in your district, and by the way, they weren't heartless, greedy, CEOs, which is that perception. These are people doing small little businesses doing a ton for their community, and without them, we saw during the pandemic, not only do you not have an economy, you don't have opportunities for our residents. The lights go out in the whole state when you don't have the business community, and so you can treat them like they're heartless, or you could realize what they truly are, and support them, because when you grow the economy, you then create more opportunities for our residents.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm a business leader that wants to just get involved, like, what would you say is like, here's the place to start. Just do this, right? Like, if you can give like a one entryway in for somebody, right? So a listener that's like, hey, I'm thinking about this, but I don't know what's the right thing to do. What would you suggest? Yeah,
there's so many front doors. I do encourage people to come to an event, even as our guests. If you've been there, I smile whenever I think about our events. We do about 35 events a year, but the energy level, the camaraderie, the passion, little businesses talking to big businesses, this industry talking to that industry. And people in Connecticut just love each other. They just love hanging out with each other. And so, I always encourage people to go to our events. And certainly there's certain events that maybe apply if you're a manufacturer. These events are more manufacturing focused, but you could attend any event and still get that passion. Mm-hmm. Everyone struggles with workforce. Our workforce summit that you run the panel is kind of a general catch-all. If you go to that workforce summit, you walk out of there with a notepad of like, oh, I didn't know about this program that existed. I didn't know about this organization that could help me find and retain my employees. So you walk out of there with definitely some great best practices. And there's a lot of HR people, CEOs there, small businesses, there's public sector there, there's students there. Mm-hmm. That's a good catch-all as well. But our economic conferences, if you want to know what's going on in a national and local economy, those are good too. So, but certainly I think our events is just, you get a good taste of the overall membership, and whether it's a lead gen opportunity for a specific company because there's some potential customers in there, or I just want to get to know more business people because when I have a struggle, I want to be able to bounce ideas off of
100%.
the espresso crushers or whatever the group is that you end up creating down the road. Mm-hmm. I think the events is always a good front door to start, but there's so many. I never not take a text, an email, or phone call if people have questions. Our membership team too will take and say, this is the best front door for you. Try it too. By the way, I don't want people just writing checks to CBIA. I tell our team this all the time. I want them to get a return on investment because I want it to be a relationship. I don't want it to be transactional. I want it to be a deep relationship like everything else in Connecticut. So let's find the best front door for them. Let's let them try that front door too. And then ask them, did you get something out of that? All right, maybe you didn't. Let's try a different front door and then until you get the one that's right. Because there's definitely, like you said, there's something in there for everyone, and there's a return on investment for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo the event idea because I think a lot of people think about the event topic as the thing that needs to be the impactful part, when in reality, it doesn't matter what we're talking about, right? Like, it's less about that specific event and, even potentially the people that are speaking in the event. Maybe you do want to hear what they're saying, or you have a specific need, but I think it's the conversations and the relationships you can build by being in the room and then networking and talking with people, right? It's what you get from that. And CBIA is, one of the largest organizations, right, with a huge membership that, like, where else are you going to find the opportunity to have that many people in a room that you can just walk up to and bounce ideas or ask questions or something like that? So I love it for that part of it. And again, if you can't make a 2-hour, window in your week work to go to one of those events, like, I started in this organization as employee 17, running 6 departments myself. Like, I was able to make an attempt to get to that stuff. Like, no one's that busy that they can't make it. And so I love it. Let's start there. Like, I love that idea. So, if we're talking about, earlier we talked about embracing failure, and you have this concept of, advocating for fail fast and fail often. How has failure, shaped your career and your leadership style now?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because people are like, why would you advocate as a leader for failing? And I didn't, this wasn't kind of a key value for me when I was a lawyer, because I had partners who, if I did bad research, and sometimes I did, failing was not good. They'd be like, "What? You're wasting my time. Go back and do, find the right case law." And
Yeah,
it's law is interesting. It's black and white, but you're supposed to try to find the gray in that black and white. And so your research has to be really efficient, really good. Writing has to be incredible. But when I got into the manufacturing, I didn't know anything about being a leader of a business. I didn't know anything about running a business. I didn't know anything about manufacturing. I didn't know anything about a lot of the things that I was invited into, fortunately, because of a family relationship. I probably, if I was applying to a job in manufacturing, I probably would have never got one as an attorney, although I did work with a lot of manufacturers when practicing.
Yeah.
So I ended up failing a lot, especially all the time, but especially in my early years in manufacturing, and from that learned a lot. That's when you, as they say, when you burn your hand on the stove, you remember that you burned your hand on the stove and why you did it. It stays with you for a long time. It creates a deep roots in the brain that, okay, I know now something. And so I learned in manufacturing, and then as our culture kind of evolved, and I started to bring in a lot of consultants because I didn't know. So I learned from bringing in consultants and a variety of things, whether it was culture and engagement or leadership or continuous improvement and operational excellence. I learned that, even what you're doing, you may think is doing it right, but you're failing in some cases. And so there's an opportunity for continuous improvement to do processes better, to do things better. So when you had a defect, what we call either a return from a customer or a non-conforming part, you do root cause corrective action analysis, and you end up improving your processes even more through some of that failure. Now, the failure is painful; it costs money, right? You scrapped a part or you defected a part. Your parts are later to get to customer, maybe whatever. There's a lot of pain that goes with it, so you eventually want to eliminate those defects. But at the same time, there's some really, really deep learnings that happen. So I found that not only did I grow as a leader and when I failed, but also the organization in these areas where we weren't as strong grew as well. And so I really kind of then started to publicly say, hey, it's okay to fail. Let's create a culture where failing is okay. We don't want to intentionally fail, but if things happen, it's okay. Let's admit the failure. Let's actually not only just admit it, but let's shine a bright spotlight on it, and all come around it and all learn from it. Not point fingers at individuals, but there's an accountability there where we're now going to learn from our failures. So one of my mentors used to say, failure is like finding a shiny piece of gold, and you gotta nurture it and own it and love it because it has so much value to it that you'll grow from it. And another mentor I had, and I now use this line all the time, used to say, I reserve the right to be wrong, right? I reserve the right to fail, basically.
Yep.
And then if I am wrong, using the plan, do, check, adjust cycle or plan, do, check, act, we've done something, where you find out that it wasn't the right thing. Now let's make the adjustment.
Yep.
And I think that's where a lot of people fail in the failing concept is, they fail and everyone sweeps it on the rug, runs away from it. Oh boy, we did something went wrong, and you don't make the adjustment. And so, hopefully at CBIA, I think we have that same culture where we're always trying different things, trying different events, tweaking our events, different content, trying different products. We just launched a new medical product last September. We're always trying to do things for the membership, adding another policy council. Moving, as I said, we've had different products and services over the years, and some don't exist anymore. And that's, it's not a failure, but it's a type of this whole scientific experiment in the business community, which I think some people get uncomfortable with. But that's life. I mean, life is a whole scientific experiment. In my mind, you just learn forever. And the day you stop learning is really the day you're not alive anymore. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, even drawing parallels to my own experience of anytime we bring people onto our organization at Charles IT, it's I'd rather, I care less about the mistake. I care more about what you do once you make the mistake, right? How do we make sure that, we've learned from it, that we're making, putting something in place that won't happen again. And that has stuck with me. And another saying, which, part of what we're going to talk about a little bit more is what's smart risk taking and that kind of stuff. But a saying that stuck with me from when I first started, Foster, our CEO, was I'd rather have you make the wrong decision than no decision at all, right? Because you're not going to learn if you're staying stagnant, and take the chance, make sure it's an educated guess or calculated risk. But I'd rather have you make the wrong decision than no decision, because that's what prevents progress. So
my dad had that similar thing as Foster. It's interesting because I think Foster has a little bit of a serial entrepreneur as well, even though he's had the same organization, he's done it in a very entrepreneurial way. And when I first started the company, my dad, took me a very long time to make decisions. The lawyer, the analytics, the coming into play. And my dad used to have this saying, and sometimes he'd say it very publicly with me there, that I bought and sold companies faster than you can make decisions. He used to say that. And it's he's probably right by that, because it was always turning these different companies. And I just wasn't the same risk taker that he was. But at the same time, I couldn't do that analysis paralysis, right? So you've got to find that balance in between. I'm still not the same risk taker he is, but I think accepting failure is a way to be able to move things a little quicker, and like you said, then make the adjustments. Yeah,
for sure. So as we transition to the last part here of our episode. Having you here, I'd be remiss if I don't ask some questions about where do you see some of the biggest shifts, for Connecticut's business landscape, in the next 6-12 months? What do you see that as?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions activity taking place in Connecticut. I think it highlights the incredible businesses we have, the incredible workforce we have, the innovators in Connecticut. And so there's been a lot of, companies from outside of Connecticut acquiring businesses, some big businesses, some really big businesses recently, but also some small businesses, especially with foreign companies for a while wanted to get more into the U.S. market. And they saw kind of Connecticut as this avenue because they have quality businesses that are dealing with a high cost structure, similar to the high cost structure they have in Europe. So that's both the good and the bad. I mean, I was acquired, I'd sold the business, and so I saw the opportunities for growth with a bigger company behind you, with a bigger market share, a lot more capital to be able to invest in. And so you kind of, what we used to say when we sold the company, take the governor off a family-owned business and really, really realize its true potential. At the same time, when M&A activity happens, especially from outside of the state, those businesses that do the acquiring are just less engaged in that Connecticut core business. And so when you're happy, the less engagement, you have a threat to membership at CBIA, but you just have that, what we talked about earlier, you just have those businesses that aren't as engaged or just kind of sitting on the sidelines. They're multinational or multi-state companies, and they care less maybe about what's going on at a state level and more about what's going on at a federal level, when state stuff impacts their local business much more. So that's both the good and bad, but we're seeing a lot of that. And I understand too, talking to a lot of business owners, they went through the pandemic, then they went through supply chain issues, they went through labor increases, they went through interest rates. Like, how many hamster wheels have they gone through in just the last 5 years? And it's been challenging for a lot of folks. It stresses them out, and they eventually just need to tap out. They've had enough. We used to have much longer cycles before disruptions than we've had in the last 5 years. And so there's that stress, and that sometimes leads to, I'm going to exit the business and sell to maybe a larger company who's not located in the state, and end up being less engaged. So keeping those folks engaged is really important. And it's good to see that, we've had a few reach out to us after they've sold a year or 18 months ago and be like, hey, we heard about your organization, we want to re-engage. They were engaged, they sold, they go quiet for 18 months, and then they want to re-engage. So that's good, because we want them, not just for CBIA, but we want them to be engaged in the Connecticut sector to understand how to move the needle, how to make things better. So that's certainly a disruptor that's happening there. Technology side, AI. I mean, we're being asked about artificial intelligence all the time from businesses. We're trying to do more and more best practice sharing with the business community. The public sector is grappling with this. There's been a bill the last couple of years to try to regulate artificial intelligence in Connecticut. That's a game changer. You guys see in your business even more so than we see. And in a state, again, that's competing, trying to overcome high costs. It's all about productivity gains. And that productivity gain decades ago was moving to more continuous improvement, doing things better, more efficiently in order to grow your business. Today, it's a lot around technology and innovation, and artificial intelligence is no doubt right at the center of that. And so we've been trying to do, we ourselves at CBIA are learning more about it. We just had a speaker come in and talk to our staff about how we can leverage artificial intelligence given all the different business units that we have, but then also share that with the membership. And we've got to be this educator, we've got to be this convener for our members, especially those small businesses who don't necessarily understand it, but it could be something that help them increase their productivity and further overcome the higher costs of doing business. So that's a big one. The growing sectors we see in the state outside of technology, manufacturing hasn't grown at a job number basis, but continues to grow as far as output. Manufacturing is probably going to be our largest industry sector the next 2 or 3 years. And we're not just defense, we're not just electric boat, we're not just aerospace defense, we're commercial aerospace, we do medical devices, consumer manufacturing. It's a very diverse 4,700 manufacturers across our state. Again, a lot of them small companies. But that's certainly a backbone for us and something we could continue to invest in and grow. And so that's a critical sector. And then something that people didn't realize, but maybe they're starting to see it more now post-pandemic, is logistics and transportation. Connecticut's a nice location for rail and water and airports, and especially now having 2 very vibrant airports with Tweed and Bradley. Our real estate is a lot less than Boston or New York. And so logistics, warehouse, transportation has been a growing sector in Connecticut, from both a job as well as a GDP output. And all of those that I talked about are not just jobs. I mean, they're really good career opportunities, and that they pay well, but also upward mobility in all of those sectors. So the future is bright for Connecticut. We've really handled the pandemic great. We've had some tremendous growth. We're one of the only states to have population growth all 5 years post-pandemic after a decade of having population outflow. There's more that we can do, but there's a lot of things going on very, very positively in Connecticut.
So I guess last question for me is to really dive into, some advice or words of wisdom that you could give to other business leaders, who are struggling with messaging or engagement from their own internal team, since you're focused on that internally and externally. What would you say is some advice that you would give to them to help improve, messaging and engagement?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be able to paint the picture for people. I'm a very strategic thinker. I am terrible with detail. I tell people that. I'm very admitted to that. I can I see where I want to go. I see where the organization can go. I see where the state can go, and I can close my eyes and literally visualize it. I cannot build the framework around necessarily getting there, but that's why you have different types of thinkers and different types of people that you collaborate with and fill in that detail. But you've got to, if you're a leader in my position, you've got to paint that picture. You got to literally have people see that same visualization that you're seeing. So closing my eyes and seeing that vibrant economy, or internally seeing what the organization will look like, and where we'll go. It's important to really give some detail behind that picture, because not everyone can necessarily close their eyes and see what's in your head. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Maybe AI can help with that down the road. Hopefully it can. So that's really important. I've learned a lot about that over the last probably 10, 15 years, is to appreciate and understand that not everyone is seeing that same visual that I'm seeing. And so sit down with them, spend as much time giving detail as you can, knowing that I don't have all the details, at least so that they can see what that future state looks like. And then the with them, the what's in it for me. And that's both internally, externally, members, externally, public sector, is sitting down with people and saying, if we do this, this is what's in it for you personally, whether it's job growth at CBIA or financial stability because the organization will be more diverse in its product, or whatever it is at CBIA, or externally, this is what it means for you. Your business will be more competitive. The state economy will grow. And we used to say at CBIA, we want a more competitive business climate to grow the Connecticut economy. And there was a period there. And we've talked about this messaging since I've come on with, is finishing that sentence, a more competitive business climate so the economy can grow, so we can create more opportunities for our residents. Because really everyone does benefit in a growing economy.
Yeah.
You have more tax revenue that comes into the state, you can have more state programs, you can invest in infrastructure and education, there's more job opportunities, so job mobility, job growth. There's a lot you can do with a growing economy. And so it's not just more competitive to grow the economy, to make businesses more competitive. That's circular reference of business greed that some politicians think is out there, which again is lacking and not correct, but really creating these opportunities for our residents. So the WIFM, the what's in it for me, and visualizing, I think, are two really important things that I've learned, at least in my position, as far as what business leaders can do to convey their vision, their mission, get people rowing in the same direction.
Absolutely.
There's certainly tactical, mechanical things you could do to complement that, whether it's company-wide bonuses for all individuals, that cascading objectives down that are aligned and make sense, and other strategic deployment tools. But having that visualization and understanding that what's in it for me, which is different for everybody, right? You got to meet the people where they are, these WIFMs. I think those are two critical pieces to being able to successfully lead organizations and accomplish what you want as a leader.
Yeah, that is great perspective. I love everything that we talked about today. Thanks again for coming on the show and giving all the perspective that you did. I think this is definitely going to be valuable for anyone that tunes in. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me. Thanks again for the martini.
Absolutely.